Good evening, friends. This is Anil here. Thank you for joining us on this monthly webinar series. First of all, my apologies to you guys that we had a bit of an outage. We couldn't stream it. I started off to wonder whether we needed some upskilling in some of these areas, but I realize it's something to do with the Google end. So I have with me Kamal as usual.
Hello everyone. I hope 2019 has begun well for all of you, and hope the next 20 minutes that we spend, we have something to mull over for this year for us.
So Kamal, upskilling is a topic that has been widely debated, right from World Economic Forum to the seminars and workshops that we attend locally, to business leaders in their maybe thought leadership insights, and that I believe encompasses a lot of humanity. But let's talk about at an individual level, at a personal level, what upskilling means. Are you okay for that?
Absolutely. I think some other day we'll talk about how enterprise upskilling can be, but today let's stick to you and me.
Yeah.
And I guess the people who are logged in are also people like you and me. So it makes sense to talk at an individual level what upskilling means.
Yeah, let's talk about what it means on a personal journey. Begin with, let's look at what the upskilling really means. I mean, how do you look at it? Is it a treadmill get over or get off because you need to keep catching up, you need to stay relevant, so maybe you need to build the rate of change may vary from job to industry, but at an individual level you're always running. That's how I see upskilling as. Another way to look at it is it is scaling a peak, a mountain, and there is no end to it. It's a continuum. So you may have a bit of stops in between when you meet a ridge, but then it's an ongoing process. That's the way I would look at upskilling as.
For me, Anil, upskilling is also about the drivers each one of us have. For some of us, we might upskill purely because we have to survive, to stay in a job, stay in an organization, to earn the money that we are earning. For some of us, I think it is motivational in terms of taking incremental steps moving forward. But the so-called innovators or people who are really ambitious about their careers are the ones I would look at more from a scaling summits kind of people. They always like to be ahead. They like to take the risk. They make the big moves. They learn ahead of the curve. So I guess the drivers in upskilling is very important for me. And I would like to believe that the drivers actually put you in these three levels, incremental, surviving, or getting ahead of the curve.
Right. So since a lot of listeners were from the software and IT field, we thought we will look at what upskilling or career path may mean for a software engineer, and we also thought we will look at a function. So upskilling also is required for people in finance or marketing or sales. As you can see from this chart, Kamal, you can see that people have a wide array of options, and it really depends on what your personal strengths are and what your personal inclinations are, and you can traverse different kinds of paths to reach your ultimate goal, which is obviously growth and moving forward. So if you're a software engineer, you have multiple options that you can choose from, and then you can understand the skill gaps that you need to develop to get to that level. Similar for marketing. However, the end roles may change in terms of some character or some nature of how it is actually done on the ground, in over a 5-10 year period, but the content of the job still remains the same.
Yeah, Anil, I think much of these jobs as they are listed out here may also not be there tomorrow. For example, a few years ago, a digital marketing job never existed.
Right.
But still today, that's a hot skill. So I think some of the jobs listed here, in my view, are indicative from a roles perspective. But it's also tragic that your own career pathways or your skills are not actually, in a way aligned to each other. Today, growth and career pathways are defined also by experience rather than skills.
Right. So I think it's a combination of both experience as well as skills. You need to, blend both of this to move ahead. So that part, of course, is quite understood. Yeah.
And I think in terms of moving up and horizontal today, at least, I have to take the example of digital skills very clearly. It is one area where it is not about experience. It is purely about skill. So I guess people who are investing ahead of the curve in the skills are likely to have an advantage. So some of these paths that we are talking about may actually take a different direction altogether, provided your skilling pace is much higher and ahead of the curve.
Right. So we have a very different kind of approach looking at career paths. I mean, this is very pertinent for movie stars, cricket players, all sports people, I think, and this is relevant across the field. So looking at this, like, I mean, you're looking at four stalwarts, box office stars who have ruled for last 2 decades or so. What is common is they've had their share of blips, that is flops, as well as successes. What else do you reflect from these pictures?
I think many of us define career graphs by our own biases. Like we might actually say that, let's say Amir Khan and Akshay almost started like in different genres. Like Amir Khan was the Milson Boone, started with the romantic hero kind of roles. Akshay started more in the action arena, and how he progressed to be a comedy star eventually, and now doing something which is very socially impacting kind of roles, And somewhere from an image point of view, Amir has always maintained that he's the guy who's possibly, most innovative, taken different paths, done TV, kind of a reality show, kind of anchoring and things like that. But having said that, for me, the career graph of Shah Rukh and Salman is equally, impressive, for the reason that we're not looking at how it is impacting the creative buds, but also how they found their niche and stayed relevant in the changing era of cinema, whether it was TV, cinema, when cable TV came into play, the movement into the Netflixes and the Hotstars of the world, and how today the digital entertainment has come into play. These people have been able to stay relevant into that mode. So I think career graphs today is not about how you are able to do different things. Very clearly in the Bollywood case, it's about staying relevant to the new audience and the new technology platforms that have come into play. And I think kudos to them, that I would clearly point out that they've had careers in terms of, if you look at the Reds there, they're clearly pointing out that all of them have had more hits than the flops, if you want to define success that way. So for me, career graph is also about staying relevant at the right time to the right audience.
I can see the amount of hard work and innovation and skill building they would have done to move from one genre to another genre. And I think that's quite evident from this.
Yeah, which is sadly would be masked by our own preferences of how we define creativity and, but we would ignore possibly what is the sweat that has gone beyond for them to stay relevant.
So I'm not going to ask you to stick your neck out and say who's your most favorite star. So that's for another day.
That's for another day. Yeah.
Right.
They, at different points in my life, they were all my favorites in one way or the other.
So Kamal, we are often asked what upskilling really is. Is it, do I sign up for an online course like a Coursera, or I do a Simply Learn, program for 3 months, 4 months? So this is really about reflecting on what really upskilling is. So maybe it's a combination of many things, but then we put out individually what upskilling actually means. Is it reading books? Is it attending a higher MBA program that you've always wanted to do? Is it just signing up for in-house programs that your company may put out? So these are some of the examples of what really upskilling means. But is that the ball is in your court. It's not necessarily an organizational driven approach. It's more, I would think, of an approach that an individual drives out of his own self-initiative. Don't you think so?
No, absolutely. I think what all you said actually can be standalone for some cases, and could be a combination of the above. If I had to take the example of, let's say, digital marketing, there are people who possibly moved into the era by just doing a 6-month course. It got them to the next stage. But if you look at a holistic upskilling, it's a combination of all these things: doing certification, doing higher studies, attending in-house training programs if your organization offers one, constantly being on podcasts and books, attending conferences and webinars, and signing up for assignments which where you really never had an experience before. We always go and take up roles where we possibly know it better. And people also hire us like that this guy has done this before.
Right.
So for us, I think I would look at all these things together, and what you do with it as a person individually is upskilling. It's standalone as well as a combination of all these things.
So let's see how all of this comes together, Kamal. How does upskilling actually help you build competence? I look at it as something that you would do on a regular basis. Upskilling happens on a continuous basis, and that combined with the right habits, you need to back it up with the right habits, and then you apply it in your job. It's another matter that you learn, which can be more academic or more theoretical, but then when you apply it in the job, then you actually start to refine your skills. So do you think that this encapsulates the process of actually upskilling? And then you ultimately build a competence. And then I just want to ask you, Kamal, can you think of any skill that you have built over the last 3 years, or maybe 3 to 5 years sort of horizon, that you would have not thought about it earlier?
I don't know, unconsciously, subconsciously, what I would have built, but I think consciously a few years ago, I think I tried to build the skill of writing. And those days I was very scared of writing, but because I was the MD of a large consulting company, my marketeer said, look, if you're not in this area, you can't influence. You're in a leadership role, so you need to influence. One good way of doing it, those days blogs was a big thing. And I don't think that was an area that I was very comfortable with. So I was advised that I write every day. So I wrote, I made time every day morning, 7:30 to 9. I used to be in office where I shut off from the outside world and wrote everything that I thought was important in the area of world. So it was difficult. There were a lot of excuses I gave myself because I was not able to see the results of it, whether I was good at it, bad at it, or how are others reacting to my writing. So it was boring to that extent that I was doing something which I couldn't see the output. But I did for a year and a half, then started publishing in areas which was in a smaller area of influence of mine. And I got some encouragement. And so much so that it became a way of life. And of course, I had to do a whole lot of things. I had to read a lot. I had to talk to a lot of people. So it was something as a skill that I was building parallelly. And as a habit, it came into my day-to-day routine. I was writing every day. There was no Saturday. There was no Sunday. Every day, 1.5 hours I wrote. If I was not writing in my free time when I was traveling, I was thinking about it. So in a way, for a certain period of time, it was like going to the gym, of a particular time of a day. And that is how that muscle got built. So if you today ask me to sit and write for 2-3 hours, I can produce, a 900 to 1,000 words blog just like that. So from a writing, that's a muscle memory I've built on writing. Of course, I still need to do a lot of preparation, read a lot of stuff. But I think that 1.5 years where I did it every day, it became a strength of mine. But I still continue to write every day morning, 4 to 6. Even today I write, so it is something that I can't let go. But when I'm not writing, I'm reading about things, I'm meeting people. So that is one skill that I can think of that I really excel. But there's so many other things which I tried, like, for example, doing videos. I thought I could produce videos on workplace dynamics, and, that can be the next way of communicating socially. But I've done it in a very sporadic way. So I still struggle at it. And I know very clearly that I've not practiced enough. It has not been a way of life. I'm not doing it daily. I'm not practicing well enough. So I'm unable to do it. So I've seen the fruits of what I did consistently, where I thought, I succeeded, and where I'm still struggling that I've not put enough time on that.
So the start point is always a struggle, I would think, Kamal. Building any skill, I think you begin with really struggling and not feeling comfortable about it. And eventually, you start to ease into the maybe the domain of skill, right?
Yeah, I think another aspect to the beyond struggle is also that sometimes understanding, how do you know what is right for you?
Right.
At that stage, somebody told me that, look, this is right for you. There are so many 1,000 people who are blogging, and so many million people could be blogging. So which is true today. There are millions of people who are blogging in today. But I think it was important to identify that. So I think those steps, do you think, Anil, are also crucial in terms of trying to identify what is right for you for the future?
No, it is, and sometimes it comes out of your maybe deep introspection. Sometimes it comes out of observing other people, and sometimes it comes as a feedback from your bosses, managers, seniors, whoever you call it. So I think it can come from multiple places. And looking at this, you would also think that whether you needed to build a skill because you lost an opportunity, you lost an internal promotion opportunity, or you observed a trend, which is that you need to build, in your case, you're trying to build a marketing muscle or a PR muscle amongst your portfolio of other skills.
Because I was observing that there were many other peers in the industry who were writing and who were being called for giving talks.
Right.
Because somebody saw that they could write well, they could speak as well. So I thought that there was a trend where others were gaining, and that's why I thought writing is a great start.
Right. And then reaching out to influencers and trendsetters is another way where you can be in touch with what's the future, what's about to happen, and the wave that you need to ride. I think that's another area. And as long as you see the line of sight to achieving a certain goal or objective or a benefit, I think you get committed to it, isn't it?
Absolutely. You need to have an immediate reward. It could even be, I asked my marketeer today that, if when he did his digital course, what was the immediate line of sight? He said, getting a job. So he said 3 months within, I did my digital course, I got a job. So I think there has to be some immediate tangible rewards, which allows you to get started, which also allows you to say that, okay, I'm in the right direction.
Got it.
So sometimes we wait too long in the line that, okay, so much so that we become lost or we become oblivious, So in a way, it is important to be ahead of the curve, like the famous saying of, over yourself before you get Kodak. That I think is very much apt for upskilling.
Right. So we have seen this in the game of cricket as well. As the games evolved from Test to One Day to T20, the players have upskilled, haven't they?
No, you should be the better judge, Anil. You captained cricket in college, so I'm very clear that the movement of reverse sweep, which people were frowning on, was a great opportunity. But to get one right, I don't know how many such practices even great players like Sachin had to do. I think the Indian fielding was always a joke on the boundary ropes. Right. And today we see people sliding. We thought it was a matter of not having enough grass on the ground, but it was a particular skill. Grass was important, but I guess today when we see the Ravindra Jadejas of the world, sliding, and saving boundaries, we know that that's an area that we've come a long way in terms of upskilling from in the point of view over a period of time, especially in cricket.
Right. The pundits may not have agreed with some of the shots that batsmen are playing, but then that's required, I guess, for the game.
No, absolutely. But at the end of the day, what was the goal? Goal was to win, score runs, save runs as well, which is what the sliding and the reverse sweeps and the switch shots that have come into play have actually done. For me, that's a definite upskill which must have been practiced in the nets.
So coming to the impediments, Kamal, I'm sure everybody wants to upskill and everybody wants to move forward. But then how come just a fraction of, a small percentage of people actually are successful in doing this?
I think inertia is a nice word for being lazy.
Yeah.
I think we're all lazy. We would like status quo. None of us like change to be caused by us or others to us. We also always think that upskilling means working hard, spending extra hours, which means that it will affect our work-life balance. So that is another fear that we have. Constantly believe there are organizational pressures. You are in a sales job, you're supposed to produce results. If you are in an IT job, you are expected to bill certain hours where the client is paying for, you have a deadline for projects. So where is the time to learn new things? The other part is support systems. Right. Very clearly, the support systems, don't you think, Anil, are very important?
Yeah, sometimes you may need your family to cooperate with you because you're going to spend extra time on building some skill. Or you may just need to excuse yourself from office to be able to do that. So you need to have a very cooperative environment in your office space, could be that. And then some of the people do think that financial resources are required. Although I feel that today learning is much more easier than it was many years back because you have all the resources online. And if somebody is really committed to learning, I think there is resources are not really a constraint.
So if there's one thing in this you would say is the biggest impediment, which one would you pick, Karan?
Well, I would think probably, maybe I would think of it as, work-life balance, Kamal. That concerns me to some extent.
Okay.
You know, because I mean, as it is, we've just started Xpheno, and we are in early stages. So spending more time outside of this, I think I would be definitely concerned.
Yeah, but for me, it would be inertia,
Right.
because I think in every role, whatever context you are in life, I think inertia is the biggest thing which comes in the way of upskilling.
Right, and then I guess you would need to make very, very big, lifestyle changes.
No, I think lifestyle changes also sometimes sounds very huge, but I think if there is a time that has to be spent, like they say that the time that you spend from 9 to 6 basically is when you earn your money, you get your job done, and that keeps you, going from a job point of view. They say that your career actually takes off, or you are able to sort of zoom faster depending on what you do from 6 to 9. So that way there is a stretch involved, and the lifestyle changes also means what do you get rid of your life to make time for this? How do you make it a part of you daily? If we are saying that upskilling happens because of a routine change, how do you change a routine? If I think of Bangalore, let's say today people have to travel from one part of the city, let's say to go to Whitefield, or you have to go from one place to crossing Silk Board, Electronic City, which are the two major bottlenecks in Bangalore. You actually spend 3 to 4 hours traveling. It could mean, could I pick a job somewhere close by, if it is possible?
Right.
I don't have to compromise on other parts of it, but there's a choice I make so that I save those 2 hours a day.
Right.
And in the 2 hours, I would actually invest in something which makes me invaluable for my next job, or to what I am passionate about, or what I think is the early trend of tomorrow. And I'll make that lifestyle change. I'll go ahead and change the job. I'll find another way to commute to ensure that, I get the time for myself. So it requires a lifestyle change, or I'll take a role which is not as demanding, because I believe that this short-term compromise, if at all, in terms of doing a role of a certain kind, which allows me to upskill myself, I would actually make that choice. But overall, I think, Anil, it's about making time.
Right.
Very clearly making time for yourself. It is important for you to evaluate progress, which you can do by seeking feedback from others. And very clearly, a lifestyle change, like they say, is about you taking charge of yourself. Most of the time, we leave it to the time when we are desperate, where we are possibly, there's no other go but to do it, or it's an organization mandate, or I lost my job once. So those are the wake-up calls. So it is important to have a career vision, and upskilling is only possible in a very proactive way without feeling the stress of it if you have a career vision. Then what follows, in my view, is discipline to execute that.
Absolutely. All right, I think we have come to an end of our session. Let's take some questions, Kamal. I think there have been some interesting questions. And while we may not go into each one, we will try and cover most aspects that people were curious to know about. So one of the question is, why do people drop out of courses that they sign up for? And I think this happens in every sphere of life, not just in learning or upskilling. People do drop out, during the course. I mean, without completing the course, it's very difficult for them to stay disciplined. Some personal situation comes up. I don't see this any different for upskilling. So this is a common
also
feature.
Reward and punishment. For example, if you look at an academic atmosphere, why do we actually go through it? One, we paid money for it. Two, there is a kind of a pressure to pass the test. There is a certain percentage. There is a peer pressure involved. In learning, we are yet to get to that stage where people are, constantly rewarded or punished. I'm sure they get rewarded eventually, for getting some skills, and it's a kind of a long-term, rewards for people. But somewhere people are unable to see the rewards and punishment the way they see it in or experienced in academics. So I guess that's another area where I think people fall out.
Right. So another interesting question was about how to enhance creativity, empathy, and resilience. It's a tough one, but I would like to think of it as, to begin with, all human beings are blessed with all these qualities in a way. It's just that how they uncover it, how they are able to recognize this in themselves. Don't you think so, Kamal?
I think in percentages, like, if you can't pinpoint anybody by saying they don't have creativity, or, people may be more bold to say I'm not a creative person. But if you ask anybody, are you somebody who's empathetic, they'd all say yes, right? So in doses of it, we will have some of these pieces. So I would say that how would you indulge yourself in terms of being in the zone of people who are creative? Can you actually be in those self-exploration workshops or places where you are able to relate to people, create empathy, and sometimes I think in the personal context we sort of shy away from being in those zones. We might know friends who are going through depression, people who are relatives who are going through a bad time. What we typically do is we shun ourselves away from them, not because we dislike them or we hate them. It's just
yeah, it's just that you don't know how to react to that situation.
Absolutely. You don't know
So
how to
you
deal
just
with
stay
it.
away from that situation.
Yeah.
And so exposing to those situations actually help you uncover these aspects of you, right?
That's the closest I could come. It's a tough question. I wish I could.
Yeah, I don't think there are manuals or courses where you can attend to, gain all these, skills. But I think it's that every human being is born with it. I would like to look at it.
Absolutely. On the third one, Anil, how will you keep active, for learning? In such people get done while working routine and monotonous work. How do you actually keep yourself active for learning? It's a subset of question one?
Yeah, I think it's a process which I can't say for sure will be exciting throughout. There will be any initial euphoria and excitement, but then slowly it may, die down somewhere. But then those are the very moments that you need to be focused on your purpose. And then the moment you focus on your purpose and your goal, I think you're able to revive that. And I'm sure that,
I would give the same answer as one. The activity comes if there is a reward or a punishment. Otherwise, it's very difficult to be self-motivated on the learning front.
True, but then, once you signed up, if you're somebody who really wants to complete something, then I'm sure you will, even though you're not really excited on week 3 or week 4, you would stay the course. And then once you complete it, then you can hope to see some rewards later. Kamal, one of the other questions that came up was that, how do employers create awareness among their employees in the area of upskilling? You think it starts from the top, obviously?
Obviously, I think today morning we were having a discussion, here and our own team was saying that, if it starts with the leader, then it sort of percolates. And the famous example that was quoted was of Mark Zuckerberg, that they said, look, he took up a challenge that, in that year that he will learn Mandarin.
Right.
And given to understand, it takes about 4,000 hours to, master Mandarin. And eventually they saw that, he was struggling to get to a certain stage, or the efforts he was putting in was also motivating to others. So very clearly there's a message that, if the leaders are actually also themselves immersed in it rather than just telling others, it makes a huge difference for people to, institutionalize it at an organizational level.
I totally agree, Kamal. Sometimes companies do, as a matter of tokenism, do these programs, but then if the leaders committed to upskilling, then obviously the members, follow suit, and it becomes a part of the culture. So this may be something that you may be interested in answering, Kamal. How do people move up in sales?
Very realistically, Anil, sales is as much as we feel we have arrived, and I've been a sales guy for the longest time in my life. And 2 years ago, I went for a very intense 3-day program, and it didn't end in 3 days. We had a lot of things to do after that for a year, and there was a follow-up program on that. So essentially, some of the skills that I learned in those 3 days was about storytelling. How do you sell through empathy? I always thought in the past selling was about being smart, outsmarting the customer,
right,
and somehow closing the deal. It was always about asking for the business, probing, fab matching, as they used to call it, feature advantage, benefits to customer. Those were the things that were taught. But I realized that how empathy, storytelling, and connecting to the customer made such a huge difference. And we had to demonstrate over the next 6 months how exactly that got played out. So I think every industry has its own nuances of selling. And I think if you go back and look at each of these industries and each of the level, there are certain new skills that you can learn which are specific to whether it's banking, IT. I think they all have their own nuances. But one basic fundamental thing of how you are able to connect to customer, I think will remain paramount irrespective of which industry it is. So there's so much to learn, and you just need to look out for it.
Yeah, it's heartening to learn that, Kamal, after many years, you still attended a program and then you got to learn something new, which you will use, I'm sure, for the rest of your life. So that's the heartening part. I think we are out of time, Kamal. There are maybe one or two questions that we may have missed. Sorry about that. But in conclusion, we can just thank the people who attended the webinar today. And until next time, when we come up with more topics, bye-bye.
Thank you all for logging in. I apologize again that some of you had to wait. And we look forward to interacting with you again in February. Till then, thank you very much. Bye-bye.